All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back in session in People versus Robert Durst. All jurors and alternates have returned. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. Chesnoff and Mr. DeGuerin. We have all of the Council for the People are present with Mr. Henderson at council table. Ladies and gentlemen, a couple calendar issues are things for you to note. On June 14th, we're going to have a longer lunch break. Okay, so that's we're going to on that day we're going to return from lunch at 2 p.m. So there's a long lunch on Monday, June 14th. The second day to note is July 22, Thursday. We're not going to be in session on that date at all. So that gives you a lovely 4-day weekend, 4-day break from this trial when it, just when we'll need it. So July 22, if you want to make some other plan, feel free to do so on that weekend or on that starting on that Thursday. So with that, Mr. Henderson, are you ready to play the balance of the video testimony of Daniel Goldberg?
Yes, thank you. Resuming exactly where we left off. This People 78, testimony of Danny Goldberg, 12 minutes, 3 seconds.
With Susie much closer in time to her murder.
Yes.
Do you recall having conversations with her in the late 90s or maybe even 2000 before her murder regarding this issue?
I remember certainly the last conversation I had with her came up, and that was, I guess, the year 2000.
And if you can you please relate what occurred during the conversation that was stated?
Well, most of it we were catching up on personal matters, and she was asking about my children. So the part that's relevant to what you're asking me, I think, is that she told me that that Bobby was worried that it was possible the investigation into what happened to Kathy would be reopened because up until that point, supposedly, this is what I remember her telling me, supposedly there hadn't been convictions without a body, and that there then had been some conviction without a body, and there was a possibility that the Westchester prosecutor might reopen it, and that he was worried about that.
Do you recall when we spoke in February 2015, do you recall telling myself and Detective Lopez that you asked Susan, hey, what really happened regarding Kathy?
Well, I think I said, well, I don't remember exactly what I told you in the phone conversation. What I remember now is saying, what do you think really happened? Because enough time had passed. You know, she'd always been very quiet about it. I thought she might have something different to say.
All right, we're going to play, it's going to be DG005, clip, February 20th, 2015, page 21 of the transcript, line 23 to page 22, line 6.
And so now you're going to mark this as an exhibit,
yes.
And the next exhibit in order.
People's 46 and
46 and 46A.
It's hard for me to remember whether this was one conversation or they were spread out over 2 or 3 conversations. But at some point, you know, I know you my answer, but I guess you told me Bobby lost her money or some period of time and that came up. And I asked her, so what do you think really happened? And she said, this is another quote, so this is kind of misuse of what she said, but it was definitely something I remember. She said, you know, I'm a gangster's daughter, so I have different standards for my friends than other people do. I don't have that many friends, but I think probably he killed her.
Do you recall making that statement to me?
Well, I hear the tape, and I assume it's accurate.
In that's your voice, correct?
It sounds like me.
Mr. Goldberg, in that quote, you said it was definitely something I remember. and then you gave the quote of, you know, I'm not a gangster's daughter. I just want to clarify. Your position is that this is not an exact quote, but that is your best memory of what she said. Is that correct?
Well, I remember the phrase, I'm the gangster's daughter, that just stuck in my mind as something poignant about the way Susan viewed herself. The other part of what you played, you know, was a longer conversation, and I obviously seem to have said it, but as I sit here now, I remember it slightly differently.
And, Mr. Goldberg, is it fair to say that the comments about I'm a gangster's daughter, I have different standards, that was Susan Berman referring to her relationship with Bob Durst and the situation with Kathy Durst, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember, to the best of your memory, her saying the comments about having different standards for her friends and other people?
Yes.
And do you remember whether she used the exact words or not, her in essence telling you, communicating to you that she believed that Robert Durst had killed his wife?
I don't remember. I don't remember. Despite the fact that on the tape I said that, as I sit here now, I remember it slightly differently.
How is it that you remember differently? In other words, what do you remember?
My memory is that what she was saying is, even if he killed her, he's still my friend.
You would agree that's not what you said at the time on this?
I hear you. I'm just telling you right now, as I sit here, how it exists in my memory. It was quite a long time ago.
During your conversation with her, did the conversation come up about how she loved her father even though he had killed her?
I certainly knew that's what she meant. I don't know whether she used those words or not.
Code DG006, people's next in order, I think we're...
47A.
Page 22, lines 12 through 15. That's what you said.
No, I agree with what I thought that's just how I answered your question.
So your position is that that statement is a true statement of what Susan said to you?
I think it's a statement of what I thought she meant.
When you spoke to Susie this last time, do you recall that she conveyed to you in any way that she believed or had information that Bob Durst had killed his wife?
No.
At the time that you spoke to her, in the way that she conveyed the situation with Kathy Durst, did she make it appear to you that she knew more than what she was willing to tell you?
Yes.
And can you describe what you mean by that?
She always was secretive about that situation and never talked about it much.
Do you recall specifically what her words were or what the content of that part of the conversation was?
I don't, but she was always kept it as a confidential thing between them that she didn't talk much to me about.
Code DG16, February 20th, 2015, page 40, line 25 to page 41, line 11. People's next in order.
48A and 48A.
Susan knew more than what you said. That's not from something you read. That's not from something you saw in a movie. That's from talking to her in that conversation. How she said, I'm a gangster's daughter. She was just leading me to believe there was more there. And I told her at the time there was more there. It was a weird story. And I
telling you that Bob had killed Kathy specifically. That was your testimony a moment ago. Do you recall?
Yes.
Code DG007.
Because you're marking 49 and 49A.
Yes, yeah, page 220, page 22, line 26, to page 23, line 6.
Well, he's my friend, but I think he probably, even him, I think he probably could kill her, you know. But he's my friend, I don't have that many friends, to be honest. I wish I could remember this. I didn't know at the time, and, you know, I don't have a photographic memory, but you know, my feeling is what she was telling me is that she thinks he probably killed her, but he's her friend anyway, because she just treasures the few friends she has, and he's one of them, and as a gangster's daughter, that doesn't disqualify somebody from friendship.
Mr. Goldberg, would you agree that in making that statement, you did not qualify at all for belief that Susan was telling you that she believed that Bob Durst had killed his wife?
You know, I think what I was saying is that I thought that's what she meant, as opposed to that's what she said.
And in terms of whether we're talking about the exact words, is it fair to say, Mr. Goldberg, that your belief was in having the conversation, that whether she was using the exact words or not, that is what she was conveying to you, that Bob Durst had killed his wife, Kathy?
I thought there was a good possibility that's what she was conveying to me. She didn't say it in such an explicit way, but I thought there was a good chance she was saying that.
You did use the words, but you know, my feeling is that she was telling you that she thinks he probably killed her. That's what you said, correct? And during this conversation, Susan made a big deal over the fact that they had never found a body previously, and that prior to the reinvestigation had meant that they couldn't prosecute the case. Is that right?
Yes.
And now all of a sudden, that potentially there was a change in the DA, and the situation was now different.
I didn't know that there was a change in the DA, but she said the situation was now different.
Were you aware of Susan's financial situation with respect to her time in Karr?
Yes.
And can you tell me what you knew about that?
She was living with Paul Kaufman. I don't know for how long. It seemed to me like it was a few years. And she had a certain amount of savings and spent it, almost all of it, trying to develop a musical theater piece that never came to fruition, and that meant that she had very little money left.
Did Susan ever come to you for money?
She did.
And did you ever loan her any money?
I did.
How much did you loan her?
I think it was $5,000.
Do you remember when this was in terms of any idea of how long?
I don't really remember. It seems to me like it would have been in the second half of the 90s, but I don't remember exactly which year it was.
When you loaned it to her, is it fair to say that there was no formal loan agreement?
Yes.
Is it also fair to say that you weren't planning on getting this money back?
I wasn't counting on getting it back, that's for sure. I think if she made money, she would have paid me back.
Did you ever get the money back?
No.
Is it your memory that you found out about the Kathy Durst reinvestigation from Susan?
Oh, yes.
And during your time speaking to her, did she mention anything about having been contacted regarding the investigation?
No.
Do you recall what was her reaction specifically when she told you that there was a new investigation into Kathy's disappearance?
I think she was worried about Bobby, or she was worried that he was worried.
And is it fair to say that she did not in any way seem happy? Wow, they're going to reinvestigate. Maybe they'll find the person who killed my best friend's wife. Did she express those kind of sentiments?
No, her concern was about Bobby.
And did she also make it clear to you that this reinvestigation was not a positive development for her friend Bobby Durst?
Correct.
Did she tell you that Bob Durst was, quote, nervous about the reinvestigation?
Yes.
And did she relate to you that he was now nervous because he was concerned that even though there wasn't a body, that might not forestall prosecution any longer?
Yes.
Did Susan tell you that Bob Durst had loaned her money?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
I don't remember more than that. I was aware of the fact he loaned her money. I think she said that he'd been very helpful. I think it was in that, she was appreciative of it.
Do you know when those loans took place?
No.
Was Susan the kind of person whose nature was to keep secrets?
Yes.
And if I were to ask you, I want you to assume the following, given your relationship with her. I want you to assume that Susan Berman made a phone call after Kathy Durst's death to the dean of the medical school, pretending to be Kathy. I want you to assume that for a moment. And I want you to tell me, knowing your relationship with her, with Susan, is that the kind of thing that you think she would have volunteered to do?
No.
And why is that?
She was being very secretive and discreet about the whole situation, and I was not that close a confidant that she would tell me things every single thing that was going on with her, and it wouldn't surprise me at all that she would not tell me something like that if that hypothetical thing can happen.
Knowing yourself, are you the kind of person, let's assume that she would have told you that. Given your relationship, do you believe that she would have thought you would have been judgmental about it?
I don't know how to...
DG 14, people's next in order. Mr. Goldberg, how old are you?
67?
DG 003. No, I'm sorry, you're right. DG 014, I'm sorry. I don't know if I gave the page 39, lines 14 and 19, same interview.
And that's again 50 and 58.
Zach, you said a moment ago you didn't really think so. Was that?
I didn't, I think that's probably true what you just played. I'm not contradicting it. My memory and focus on it is not the same now as when I had that conversation. But I think that's true.
So let me ask something. You know yourself. And so there are individuals that you could share things with. As an example, you might be cheating on your girlfriend and you might tell a buddy, hey, I'm cheating on my wife and my girlfriend. There are some people you would know that their response is going to be they don't really care, and other people who are going to think less of you. You agree that you understand the foundational prerequisite that I'm setting up here? You understand my example so far?
I understand it, yes.
So my question is, knowing you and knowing what Susan knew about you, do you think that she would have been aware that, you know what, you would have been judgmental on something like this, as you said you weren't?
Sure. I definitely, though she didn't tell me, I'm not surprised she was keeping a lot of this from me, and That makes sense to me. What I said it then, I'm not contradicting it now. It doesn't form itself in my brain the same way now as it did in that conversation. But I'm not contradicting or walking away from that recording.
Would you describe Susan as a perceptive person?
Yes.
And it's fair to say, very perceptive.
Yes.
And if I were to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 100, in that same scenario, with 1 being she absolutely would have told me, and 100 being there's no way she would have told me, what number would you say?
I would say 100.
The last time you had contact with Susan, was it by phone or was it in person?
It was on the phone.
And do you know when that was?
It was, I think it was December of whatever year it was that she was killed. It certainly was after Thanksgiving because it was prior to my family going away for the holiday period. And so it's either very end of November or the first half of December.
And during that call, did she mention any future plans she had to see Robert Durst?
Yes.
What did she say to you?
She said that she was expecting to see him around the holidays.
And did she expand on that any more than that?
No.
Did you ask her anything more about that?
No.
Now, if I were to ask you on a scale of 1 to 100, again, how sure are you that that's what she told you, that she had plans to see him around that time?
Which one is 100?
100 is absolute. 100 would be 1 would 0 would be no. There's no way. I'm not sure at all. 100 being I'm absolutely certain that's what you told me.
100.
And is it fair to say, Mr. Goldberg, that you have spent time when you found out Susan had been murdered trying to think about what happened?
Sure. Yes.
Is it fair to say that you've gone over in your mind, gosh, when's the last time I talked to her? What did she tell me? Things like that, correct?
Well, it definitely meant that my memory of the last conversation was much more important than it otherwise would have been.
Was this the same conversation where she mentioned the comments you made about the reinvestigation?
Yes.
And over the years, Mr. Goldberg, have you always remembered it the same way in terms of that Susan had said to you she had plans to see Bob Durst?
Yes.
How did you find out that she'd been murdered?
I don't remember how I found out. Through the media, but I don't remember whether it was online or in a newspaper. It was while we were on vacation somewhere in the Caribbean, and it was, it was through the media that I think that's how I found out. Maybe somebody called me, but my memory is reading that up.
Do you recall, was there an incident of you getting home from a trip and finding gifts?
Yes.
Can you explain what that was about, please?
Yeah, when my wife at the time and 2 kids came back from this vacation, and there was a package of gifts for the kids from her that were pretty expensive children's clothing.
And by the time you received these packages, was Susan already been murdered?
Yes, she'd already been murdered.
As you sit here today, is it fair to say that you did not want to testify unless you absolutely had to?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that you made that pretty clear to me on multiple occasions?
Yes.
And in the end, did you end up saying, you know what, I don't want to be here up to my duty, I'll do it?
Yes.
Thank you, I have no further questions.
No questions.
Thank you. May the witness be excused?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
We'll mark as People 78B, the exhibit sheet cross-references the 5 exhibits played in the video. It's a 2-page document, 78B. 78C is a 3-page transcript. In the video, it was 46A. 78D is a 3-page transcript. In the video, it was 47A. 78E is a 2-page transcript. In the video, it was 48A. 79F is a 2-page transcript. In the video, it was 49. And 78G is a 2-page transcript. In the video, it was 50.
Thank you. Next from the people.
Next from the people is a conditional examination. You're playing the video of Robin Morse. The DVD will be 79, the transcript 79A. The DVD is 1 hour and 49 minutes long.
Thank you.
Playing full 79.
Please come stand in the witness stand. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give in the constant before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I can. Please be seated. Move the chair closer to the mic. Please state and spell your first and last name.
My name is Robin. My last name is Karr, Morse. K-A-R-R-M-O-R-S-E.
You may proceed, Ms. Morse.
Morse, are you nervous today?
Yes, nervous.
And how nervous?
I think I'd rather go and have my teeth drilled all day, but I'm nervous.
I'm not gonna lie. People have compared me sometimes in my performance in court to having teeth drilled, but so let's see what I'm doing up to it. It's not gonna be bad at all. I'm gonna ask questions. If there's something you don't understand, just let us know. I will start off with my toughest question. What is your age?
I'm 72.
You are hiding it quite well.
Thank you.
Ms. Morse, can you tell me, what do you do for a living?
I'm a therapist, family therapist, and author of a couple of books on the brain.
And can you tell me what kind of education you have?
My education is in counseling psychology, and I have a master's of art in teaching in child development.
And how long have you been in the field?
About 40 years.
And when you say that you have written some books, what have you written those books on?
The books are on the relevance of trauma early in life to what happens in terms of adult behavior. As in particular, the first book is called Ghosts from the Nursery, and it's on the relevance of what happens in the first 4 years of life and adult violence. Particularly, it was written at the time of the school shootings, and we were looking at the whys and how these kids get there and what their backgrounds were.
I think I need to adjust our equipment here. Maybe I'll water up. Somehow you're,
Am I talking
the
to
way
them?
you're speaking into the microphone is making it pop a little bit. Let me, this will fix it. And then try again.
Did you get that on the book?
Okay, all right.
The second book is called Scared Sick, and it's on the relevance of early trauma in the first 4 years of life to adult health, which, you know, many people think that cancers, brain cancers and stomach problems and osteoarthritis and other things are entirely genetic. The reality is that trauma to the brain, when that organism is developing, is very relevant to creating some proclivity toward certain kinds of genetically based issues. But the issue is epigenetic for so many diseases that we look at.
Do you have an interest in juvenile justice issues?
I do.
And have you done work in that area?
I have, my very first job.
And what kind of work and interest do you have in that area?
Well, I have an interest in policy. I wrote a book about a young man that was sentenced to life at age 16. And I tend to look at a lot of behavior through the brain, which is looking, instead of looking at just psychology or kind of an ephemeral concept, it's an organic concept, and it's very much affected by my experience.
In terms of your policy positions that you take, is it fair to say that you would agree that you tend to be more defense-oriented than prosecution-oriented?
Well, it depends. It depends on the individual and on the defendant, but yes.
And in fact, you have you spent time with an individual who's on death row.
I did, and I do.
As you sit here today, is this the first time that you've ever testified, been called by the prosecution in a case?
Yes, it's the first time I've been called by the prosecution.
And in terms of, you said you were nervous and you didn't want to be here. Why in particular, what is your kind of reluctance to coming into court and testifying?
I tend to be critical of the criminal justice system, of the correction system, and I feel badly about my friend and feel that I need to do it, but I don't like being here.
So I'm going to start off and ask you, when I say the name Susan Berman, is that a name that you recognize?
Of course.
And how did you know Susan Berman?
I met her when we were about 13, and we were in high school. We were in a girls' boarding school, and she and I were the only two orphans, and we became very close friends.
And where was this, in what state?
St. Helens Hall in Portland, Oregon.
And do you recall, you said high school, but then I think you said, what age was it? 13.
I think she came to the hall a year earlier, but I can't remember that. I think she came in the 8th grade, but the school goes K through 12, and I think she came in the middle of the year, but toward the end of the 8th grade, but we met. Basically, we were fast friends in high school.
And when you said that the two of you were the only orphans, how did you find out that she was an orphan?
I've known Susie really well, and in fact, she told me that about her mother's death. She told me about her father's death.
If I were to ask you, when you first got to know Susan Berman at school, how close did you two become when you were in high school?
Very close. We spent most weekends together. Any time that we were in class, she stayed at my house. And I went with her to Vegas and met Uncle Chicky and Aunt Marge. And we were very close. We saw each other every day. We talked every day, and we talked deeply. She had been very afraid. She believed that her mother and her father were killed by the mob. She didn't, that isn't the truth, apparently, but she believed that, and she was pretty paranoid.
So this is a question is not an invitation to tell a story. A question calls for an answer. So listen to the question and answer only the question.
Okay.
You may proceed.
Is it fair to say, ma'am, that Susan Berman was one of your kind of all-time closest friends?
Absolutely.
Can you describe, if I were to say, what was her personality like? Can you describe her? And if you can, I'm more interested in her personality, as an adult rather than when you first met her.
She was smart and energetic and funny and a little neurotic. She had a lot of phobias.
What do you mean by that?
Well, she at one point was in an accident because she was afraid of going over bridges. She was afraid of heights. She was always afraid of anyone getting her. She was neurotic,
How was she about her personal security?
hypervigilant.
Is she the kind of person, based on your experience with her, that would let a stranger into her home in the middle of the night?
Absolutely not.
Did you guys remain the same level of close friends throughout high school?
Yes,
And did you both graduate from high school?
yes,
Were you the same year?
yes,
Do you remember what year you guys graduated?
63.
And after high school, did you and Susan stay in contact?
Yes, she was in my wedding. We were all the way through close friends.
And what year were you married?
1965,
And was that up in Oregon?
yes.
And you said Susan came up for the wedding, was it your wedding?
Oh, yeah.
Did Susan go to college, if you can remember, locally, or did she go out of state?
She went to Berkeley and UCLA, and I visited her there.
Do you know, as you sit here today, do you remember if she went to Berkeley first or UCLA first?
I think she went to Berkeley first, but I'm not sure.
Did you stay in contact with her throughout her college years?
I did.
And how often do you think you guys would talk while she was away in college?
Every couple of months for a couple of hours. Yeah.
Did you did you see her much?
Anytime there were boy problems or things that she was working on, I was sort of a foul weather friend. But she'd call me when stuff was going on.
Do you remember when the last time was that you actually physically saw Susan?
I saw her in New York. I don't remember the year, but I had young children. My husband and I went to New York City to visit with her.
Do you remember telling detectives previously in 2001 that you had last seen her about 17 years ago, which would be about 1984?
Yes,
Does that sound about right?
it does. The reason, yes, because I have a 2-year-old, and he was born in 82.
Were you aware of any of the men in Susan's life?
Yes.
And did you meet any of Susan's boyfriends?
No. Well, yes, when she was at Berkeley, I did.
When Susan was away at school, did Susan mention to you a wealthy friend that she had?
She mentioned several wealthy friends. She was a good knee dropper. Yes, she did.
All right, ma'am. Was there an individual that she mentioned that was from a powerful family in New York?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about this individual?
She told me they were very close friends. She was very loyal to this person, and she told me that she knew his wife as well, and that they were all friends.
And did you hear about this person while Susan was in college, or was this somebody you only heard about much later?
Oh, no, later. I'm sorry. Yes, later. I think it was later. I don't remember her. I don't remember that she was in college at the time that she talked about the friendship, but she didn't tell me a whole lot about the situation until later.
So you knew about this person in college, but you didn't get
Yes.
the details until much later.
That's right.
You were aware and you were told that this person was wealthy and connected and lived in New York. Is that correct?
That's right.
Well, will you wait until the question's finished before you answer? Because our court reporter's trying to take it all down. You're actually speaking before the answer's completed. So wait until you hear the answer, pause a moment, and then give your answer.
Do you recall if at that time Susan told you, or if you remember, what this person's name was?
No.
Did she indicate to you how close she was to this person?
They were good friends. She felt very simpatico, and she loved him. Not romantically, but as a friend.
Did she mention anything about this individual's family history that you can recall?
Not at this moment. I don't recall a lot, except as I mentioned, I said she knew his wife later.
Do you know specifically, let me back it up, do you know specifically the first time, if you can remember, and you're shaking your head?
I don't remember.
Okay. And ma'am, I want to ask you something. As a psychotherapist, the way that your mind works, have you expressed previously to us that you're more relational oriented and that you tend to remember things people have told you better than the timing or the names?
That's right. I have.
And is that something, ma'am, that I suggested to you, or is that something you volunteered?
It's something that I volunteered because I was embarrassed that I couldn't remember. I'm a therapist. I listen to how things are happening and not so, I write down things like husbands' names and children and dates and all that. But what I remember, what I take away and what I'm working with is the feeling and is the emotion involved, and the habit, especially with Susie, because she was often kind of erratic emotionally, and my role was kind of to bring her down, to calm her down.
And you refer to her as Susie, correct?
Yeah.
With Susie, when you would speak to her, were you speaking to her as her therapist, or were you speaking to her as her friend?
I was speaking to her as her friend.
So when you were talking about that you normally take notes down, etc., is that when you're doing your therapy, or is that when
Yes, it was friend, yes. It was, I was trying to explain that I am embarrassed at the fact that I sometimes don't remember dates. My takeaway message from people is how they feel and what was going on relationally.
Again, you interrupted the question to give your answer. Please don't do that. Just wait until the question's finished and then answer.
So if, ma'am, what you mentioned before about the note-taking and the fact that you'll take notes with your patients, that is not something that you would do when you were speaking to Susie's friend. So that's what the judge means, and I understand what's going on, Ms. Morse, and it's a normal thing with witnesses. You understand my question, and the way people normally interact is when the person listening understands what the person asking is saying, they just start talking, but we don't have a court reporter normally in our lives getting everything done. Although sometimes it would help if they follow ourselves around.
It'd help at home, wouldn't it?
It would absolutely help. Exactly what I was saying. Actually, in your case, it hurt. Good. Good, that's a good point. And it's expensive. You want it back. So you can, even though I understand you know where I'm going on this, if you can just wait until I finish, because it makes it much easier on the court reporter. Does that make sense? Oh,
yes.
Here's the other thing. The court reporter, if you're nodding, they need an oral answer.
Yeah, I'm kind of afraid very much. I want to slow down for you, but...
Yeah, but you can, you're nodding your head, but you need to respond.
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay. So, let me continue 1 moment. So, what did Susie tell you, what you remember about what she would say about this person's wife?
She told me she'd gone missing. That was her word. That was what she said. She'd gone missing. And she indicated that she was kind of on the inside of that because she knew the couple. And I thought she was missing. I certainly didn't suspect anything else.
I'm going to go back, but I want to just follow my outline here so I don't miss anything. I'm going to come back where we just were. But when I say the name Niall Brenner, is that somebody that a name you remember?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell me, what do you remember about Niall Brenner?
Susie had a big crush on Niall Brenner. And she was emotionally, she was very attached to him. And I think she thought he reciprocated her feelings, but it wasn't working very well. And she later told me she thought he was bisexual.
And did Susie express frustration with you that her romantic feelings for Niall were not reciprocated?
Yes, she was frustrated and sad.
Were you familiar, and did Susie discuss her career with you over the years?
Yes?
When I say the term, the title, Easy Street, are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Can you tell me what Easy Street was?
It was the story of her growing up in Vegas and the mob and so on. It was the story of, partly, it was a lot about Susie's background.
If I were to ask you, Morse, how intelligent of a woman was Susie?
Very.
And based on your friendship with her and your knowledge, is it fair to say that she was someone whose career initially kind of took off? She was successful early in her professional life.
Yes.
Is it fair to say she was very successful early in her professional life?
I thought so, yes.
Did that professional success, did it last over time?
No.
Is it fair to say that in your experience that you got to watch Susie kind of peak early and then head down?
Yes.
How far down did you see her go?
Very far down. She had no money. I was sending her money and coffee and food. She called me very upset and very embarrassed to have to ask for money. She did.
Let me back you up. When you knew her growing up, what was her financial situation as far as
She was very wealthy.
And at some point, did that change?
Yes.
And do you know, in reference to, as you know when it changed? Any idea the year approximately?
No, it was, from my perspective, sort of an evolution over time, mostly in the last 5 years.
Were you aware that Susan had married Mr.?
Yes.
And did you go to that wedding?
I was invited. I was either pregnant or just had a brand new baby, and I sent my daughter.
And approximately, was your daughter an adult at the time?
Young adult. She was about 18.
So your daughter represented your family at her wedding?
She did.
Did you ever meet Mr.?
No.
Did you know that Susie had later dated a man named Paul Kaufman?
Yes.
Did you ever meet Paul Kaufman?
No.
Did you know that Susie ended up, in essence, having custody of Paul's 2 children?
Yes.
And did Susie seem to have, how would she talk about the children in terms of their level of importance to her?
The children were very important to her, but she had some really rocky times, particularly with Mella, the daughter.
Susie was murdered in December of 2000. Were you aware, when I say that time, does that sound about right to you?
Yes.
Around the time of her death, I'm going to, let's go back, a couple of years. How frequently were you speaking to her?
About once a month.
And those times when you would talk, do you remember what the conversations generally were about? Were they about any specific thing?
No, she generally, as I said, I was sort of a foul weather friend. She tended to call when the chips were down. And so we talked about whatever was on her mind, and I generally tried to distract her a little bit by talking about things that were familiar to us, classmates and things that we'd done together.
Do you know, in those last couple of years, did Susie discuss her financial status at that point?
I I don't know exactly when she began. I guess right in there, I began sending her money.
And did she request money from you, or did you just send it?
Well, she let me know her need. I sent her money. Later, she requested money.
Any idea how much money you sent her over time?
$1,000.
And do you recall what her financial situation was specifically in the last months when you were speaking to her?
It was terrible. She was living in poverty. She had trouble with paying basic things.
Did she mention anything about somebody sending her money?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She said that someone...
So, you can answer.
She was... You were asking me.
I'll ask again. Did she mention in the last couple of months before her murder, did she mention that someone had sent her money?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about that?
She said it wasn't enough.
Did she indicate to you who it was that had sent it to her?
No.
Do you recall previously telling detectives back in 2001, let me back up. Do you remember talking to a detective,
Yes.
Paul Coulter? So that's where the judge, if I can just finish. So, do you remember talking to a detective, Paul Coulter, from the Los Angeles Police Department's Robbery Homicide Division back in approximately March 20th, 2001?
Yes.
And
Vaguely.
right now, I would assume now, if I said, hey, do you remember everything you told Detective Coulter, my correct your answer would be, I'm not sure.
That's right.
Do you recall telling Detective Coulter that Susan told you that someone she referred to as high profile had recently sent her $15,000?
No.
As you sit here today, does that trigger any memory of you remembering, yes, you know what, I remember Susan telling me something similar, or does it not?
Yes.
So, having brought that up, do you have a memory of Susan having told you that someone high profile had sent her $15,000?
Somebody who was a good friend had sent her $15,000.
And do you also recall telling Detective Coulter that this was a big name person with a lot of money?
Yes.
But she wouldn't say who?
Yes. She wouldn't say who.
Did Susan, you mentioned before that she had told you that this friend had the wife who had disappeared. Do you recall talking about this, who was missing?
Yes.
Did Susan ever tell you that she, quote, harbored a secret for this close friend?
She said she knew a lot about it. And yes, it sounded like it was secretive information.
And I'm going to play something for you, and I want you to tell me if this is your voice. We're going to play, it's going to be code RM028, 42516, page 14, lines 20 through 24.
Is this a new exhibit?
Yes.
55 and 55A, the transcript.
Oh, yeah, the page was again on 14, page 14, lines 20 through 24. 42516.
She talked about him as a very close friend that she harbored a secret about, probably as early as, I don't know, 90s, early 90s.
Just back up.
Or the late 80s.
Okay. Is that your voice?
Ask me?
And do you recall now saying that Susan told you that she harbored a secret about this person? Those were your words, correct? Now, Is that your voice?
Yeah.
And is that what you said?
Yes.
And does that kind of refresh your memory about having previously said that she harbored a secret?
Yes.
And were those your words or were those my words?
My words.
Do you recall Susan bringing up to you at a later point in time, near the time of her murder, and asking you if you had ever heard of a case in New York involving a guy whose wife had gone missing?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about that?
Are you talking about on the last conversation that I talked, when I talked to her?
You know what, ma'am, I'm going to withdraw my question because I actually, I made a mistake in the way I asked it. Did Susan at one point ask you if you had ever heard of a case in New York involving a guy whose wife had disappeared?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She told me she was on the inside of some information about the story.
And she did not, at that point during that conversation, she did not volunteer to you what specific information she had or didn't have. Is that correct?
That's right.
Did you and Susan have more than one conversation about this friend from New York whose wife had disappeared?
Yes.
And can you tell me what else do you remember Susan saying about this situation?
I remember the night that I last talked to her, that she was very nervous, and she said that someone was coming to see her, that she was going to talk to about this case, and she said she was going to blow it wide open. It's as if she had information.
Now, I'm going to back up a second. Did Susan make clear to you how she felt about this friend?
She sounded like she was pissed. She was angry.
Did you say previously, during April 25th, 2016 interview, at page 12, lines 27 and 28 to page 13, lines 1 through 3, that you believed, I'm quoting you, I believe that we talked in 1999 about it, but she had 2 or 3 times when she brought up the situation about a friend, and that she seemed to really care about him, love him.
She did.
When you continued it, she talked about this case of his wife disappearing on a couple of occasions way back. Do you recall that being what happened?
Yes.
And if you can, I know it's difficult, but if I can just finish the question before you end up, just wait for me to stop concluding talking. I do the same thing, so it's hard. But I'm going to try to remind you as best. You don't have to slump your head. It wasn't. You're not in trouble.
This is not an ordinary conversation. This is an examination by an attorney and cross-examination by another attorney. So the question must precede the answer. You may continue. It's not an ordinary way to have conversation. So I don't fault you at all. I just need you to get used to it and try to comply with that format.
So, ma'am, did Susan Berman, did you previously say that she was elusive about revealing to you about what information she had?
Yes.
And do you recall, ma'am, saying, quote, and I'm at 425-16, page 6, and this is occurring between lines 14 through 27 approximately. You said that she was very elusive about the details, and she was also loyal to that person.
Yes.
Page 6, lines 14 through 27.
So you know when you're ready for me to continue. Okay?
I just read it.
All right. Ma'am, do you recall saying the following? And she talked about a guy she knew, and that she had mentioned that his wife had gone missing, and that she knew more about it than she was willing to say to anybody in authority. And she clearly wanted me to ask about it, and I sort of shut her down. Do you recall saying that?
Yes.
Can you please explain what you meant by that statement?
She wasn't willing to talk to me about it. She was very upset, and it was something that she was sitting on. She was very loyal to this person and made it clear that she did not want to expose him.
And ma'am, the statement, and that she knew more about it than she was willing to say to anybody in authority, is that something that you said, or is that something that came from me during our interview?
It's something I said.
And is that your memory of what Susan told you?
Yes.
Now, during your conversations with Susan Berman about, at a certain point, I'm talking about very, let me withdraw the question. Near the end of Susan's life, when this conversation about this close friend's missing wife came up, did Susan make it sound as if the friend's wife was dead?
No.
Do you recall, ma'am, telling me, I'm going to play code RM030, the date 4/25/16, page 15, lines 26 through 27. Can you play that up, please?
56A. 56A. Okay.
I assume this is being done to impeach her, Your Honor? Because she just answered the question, so it can't be a refresher recollection.
Sounds like it is. Okay.
It would be impeachment, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Made it sound like the wife was gone. Like the wife was dead.
Did she tell you that as a result of what had happened between her and this close friend in the situation involving his missing wife, that she questioned his friend's character?
Yes.
What did she tell you as best you can remember about that?
That he hadn't come through for her like she thought he would.
Did she tell you that she was now skeptical about what the friend had told her about the circumstances of his wife's disappearance?
She didn't use those words, but she sounded like she had reason not to believe everything she previously thought.
I'm going to play RM038, 4/25/16, page 23, lines 18 and 28, to page 24, lines 1 through 3.
57A.
Thank you, Ron. When you spoke to Detective Whalen, you mentioned that that Susie was questioning this friend's character, and she was skeptical about the friend and his wife's disappearance. You said, quote, she had skepticism about the circumstances of that girl's disappearance. And so is that still your understanding?
Yeah.
And so I just want to clarify this. If you're saying that she was skeptical about the friend and the wife's disappearance, and she was skeptical about the circumstances of the disappearance, did you take that to mean that, in other words, that she was now skeptical about the version of the disappearance that the friend had given about his wife?
Yeah.
Ma'am, is that your voice?
Yes,
And does that exchange, does that accurately characterize your understanding?
it does. It does. She didn't ever use the word dead. She simply said exactly what I said.
Did Susan tell you that in essence, as a result of her skepticism, she was now, quote, down, unquote, or, quote, disappointed, unquote, with this really close friend whose wife had disappeared?
Yes,
And what do you remember her saying about that?
that she wasn't who she believed he was.
Did Susan tell you that she had stuck with this close friend through him being accused of involvement in his wife's disappearance?
Yes,
Did Susan ever tell you, or did she imply to you, that she had information about this friend's wife's disappearance?
yes.
And what specifically did she say or imply or give you the impression about with respect to her knowledge of his wife's disappearance?
She simply told me she had the inside story.
And as you sit here, do you remember the exact words she used?
No.
These comments about the friend's missing wife and her statements about speaking to somebody about what had happened, did those come up near the time that she was murdered?
Yes.
Do you remember speaking to Susie sometime in December of 2000?
Yes.
And do you recall, during that conversation, do you recall Susan bringing up this issue of the friend's missing wife and the knowledge she had about the case?
Yes.
What do you remember about that?
I remember that she brought it up in the beginning of the conversation, and I was uncomfortable. I didn't want to talk about it simply because it was a hard thing to talk about, and she was getting more nervous. And I sort of tried to distract her, and then she came back to it. And I finally said to her, "Susie, what are you talking about?" And she said, "Robbie, I'd tell you, but your life would be in danger."
Do you remember her telling you that she was going to blow the case wide open?
Yes, yes.
Ma'am, do you recall what Susie told you specifically about what she was going to do?
Yes.
What did she say?
She said, and it was her phrase, that that someone was coming and she was going to blow this case wide open. And I said, "Susie, what are you talking about?"
My question is, do you recall what Susie specifically told you about what her intention was regarding this case?
She told me she was going to blow this situation wide open. She was very nervous. She was very conflicted. She was very disappointed and somewhat angry, but she was going to do it because she felt it was the right thing to do. She said, "I'm going to blow this case wide open."
Did she specifically tell you, I'm going to say the truth about the disappearance of the wife?
She might have.
I'm going to play RM024. This is going to be page 12, 425-16, lines 5 through 11.
Equals 58, 58A.
Oh, well. Yeah, play it.
Did we play what you marked as 57?
I'm pretty sure we did.
Okay, 58.
And the thing about the 2000 conversation was that there was some amount of angst. And I mean, she was telling me she was going to be a big person in this case. And was going to tell the truth. And that it was going to blow the case wide open. But she didn't say, I'm going to say the truth about the disappearance of the wife.
So ma'am, do you recall stating back during your interview on April 25th, let me put it this way, is that an accurate depiction of what
Yes.
she told you? One moment.
To answer to her.
Did, to the best of your memory, you said Susan talked about blowing the case wide open. Do you recall using that terminology?
Yes.
Have you also previously used the terminology that she had been subpoenaed, or used the word that she said testified? Do you recall that?
No.
As you sit here today, go another way, did you correct previously? Did you correct and say, you know what? Blow the case. The word case was the wrong word. I should have said situation.
Yes.
And as you sit here today, is that your memory?
Yes.
So when you're saying the term case, you don't mean in a legal standpoint like there's a
No.
legal case.
No. There was. No.
Did Susan tell you? One moment. Specifically, that she was going to be talking about the disappearance, providing information to another individual.
Not that I remember.
Ma'am, do you recall stating, you were asked, what you really mean is she's telling you she had information and she's going to be talking to somebody, and you responded, yeah. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I just want to make sure you understood my question. Previously, you testified today that Susan told you she was going to be talking to somebody, correct?
Yes.
So I just want to clarify, as you sit here today, is your memory that Susan had mentioned she was going to be talking to somebody about what she knew about this case?
Yes.
And how she
Situation. Yes, I'm positive. Yes, that's true.
Ma'am, do you recall what specifically did Susan tell you? She mentioned that she rethought her position.
She was sitting on something that she knew, and she looked back at this person with a different feeling, a different sense of who he was, and that she was going to talk about something to do with the situation.
Did she mention to you that this rethinking involved this person not having come through for her?
Yes.
Do you recall Susan Berman mentioning at any point that the individual with the missing wife had not come through for her?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to recess until 1:30. Ma'am, you're...
1:30.
You may sit down. Do not speak with any other witness about your testimony until you're done. Thanks. The next session, and witnesses resume the witness stand. You remain under oath. Mr. Durst is here with his lawyers who are under examination. Mr. Lillian, you may resume your examination.
Now, when I had asked you, you were talking about the area when you were speaking to Susan near the time of her murder. And I was asking you, excuse me, about whether or not Susan talked about having come to any realization. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall what, if anything, specifically she said to you about a realization she had come to?
I think she was disappointed and frustrated and angry at this person for not sending her money and for perhaps being a different person than she thought he was.
Do you recall her? Do you recall, ma'am, previously stating that she was deciding to spill the beans?
Yes.
Was that your term or my term?
No. What she said was that she was going to blow the situation wide open.
Did she tell you that she was going to meet with someone and that she was going to spill the beans?
Yes. Yes.
Well, if you can, again, it's kind of the same problem. If you could just wait right until I finish my question before you respond. Did Susan mention anything or imply about the purpose of the money being sent by this friend?
No.
Now, do you recall using that term, hush money, as explaining what you believe Susan was implying to you during that conversation?
I did use the term.
And again, was that a term that I brought up or that you brought up?
It's a term that I brought up.
And specifically, ma'am, do you recall saying the following? And this is from page 16, and this is between line 17 of page 16 and line 17 of page 17. Oh, I'm sorry, 218.15. Sorry about that.
New exhibit?
No, I'm not gonna play the clip at this point. I'm just gonna ask her about it. Am I?
Yes.
Ma'am, do you recall stating? Oh, the one I'm stating. Oh, you want to get? It's going to be 218.15, page 16, and this area is covered between line 17 on that page and page 17, line 17. So it's covered in this area. And so she was calling because she was in dire straits, and she was getting ready to testify at something. Something was going on. She said, it was a big deal. And one more time said, I can't tell. I said, what are you? And then you're asked, when you said she was in dire straits, just financially, emotionally, or what is it? What was it? You respond both. Detective says, okay. You then say that she was getting ready for this trial before she was being subpoenaed. She had been subpoenaed. For a moment, I apologize, Your Honor, that's not that's a fine line. Yeah, I'm sorry, let me continue. So it's still on the same time as page. You end up saying, but was that this guy had been sending her money, and she implied, but she did not use the word, she implied that it was hush money that she was being paid. Do you recall saying that?
That's right.
And although you said the hush money term was your term, in speaking to Susan about what had happened, am I correctly understanding your testimony is that is the situation she was describing?
Yes.
So the situation she's describing is hush money, but you're the one using those words.
That's right.
Thank you. Did she at any point mention to you anything about being fortunate regarding her that she needed money?
Fortunate that she needed money?
Ma'am, do you recall Susan telling you that it was fortunate for her that he needed her and was willing to send her money, keep her going? Do you recall saying that? Do you understand my question?
I have that recollection, but I wouldn't now use that word, fortunate. but I probably did use that word when I spoke to you.
Forgetting about the word fortunate, did Susan communicate to you that in essence, she was lucky, it was working out for her, whatever the term you want to use, that this person that needed Susan because of the information she had, that therefore she was saying he was setting her money?
Yes.
Ma'am, during these conversations you had with Susan near her murder, did she express any anger toward this friend regarding the financial issue?
Yes.
And can you describe what you mean by that, please?
She said that she hoped or thought there would be more support or more money forthcoming, and it had dried up, or it hadn't been happening, and she anticipated that it would have been, so she was frustrated and angry.
Did she tell you that she was did she sound on the phone ticked off?
Yes.
And are those words ticked off that you've used previously to describe?
Yes, I have used that word, and I used the word pissed off. That's cool.
During your conversations with Ms. Berman in December of 2000, did she communicate to you that because her friend had not been as generous with the money as she expected, that she was getting to a position where she was going to tell what she knew?
Yes.
Can you please explain that?
Well, she indicated that someone was coming to town and that she was going to blow the case wide open. She was going to talk about the stuff that she had been sitting on out of loyalty and out of not wanting to blow the whistle on whatever had happened, but she indicated that she was very nervous about it, she was very anxious about it, that she felt strongly that she needed to do it.
Was it you or she that connected the person had not been giving her the money she wanted with her change that she was now going to talk to this person? Is that something she said, or is that something that you took from what she told you?
I took it from what she told me, I think. She implied it very strongly.
So she didn't use those exact words.
That's right.
That was the implication of your conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Did she tell you at all that she was ambivalent about giving more information to you about the New York man and his missing wife?
Yes.
And did she tell you why she didn't want to give you information?
She told me my life would be in danger.
Specifically, do you recall what she said to you?
She said, Robbie, I would tell you, but your life would be in danger.
And ma'am, the statement, she said, I can't tell you that because it would put you in danger. Are those words you used previously to describe what Susan told you? Mm-hmm. And when you said that, did you also add, and those are close to her words?
Probably, sure.
I'm going to play RM 055, 42816, page 10, lines 26 through 28, to page 11, lines 1 through 5. 59.
And she told me that telling me the truth would endanger me. She said, I can't tell you that because it would put you in danger. And those are close to her words.
Can't tell you what?
Can't talk to me about the friend.
Okay.
It was a big deal to her. But she felt desperate and she felt determined. And that's all I remember.
Ma'am, I just want to ask you, were those your words?
Yeah.
Ma'am, you described your relationship with Susan were foul weather friend.
Yes.
I want to ask you, you were about 40. You knew her approximately 40 years, is that correct?
Yes.
In the 40 years that you knew her, was there ever another subject that the two of you talked about where she ever told you, Robbie, I can't tell you that, your life would be in danger?
Absolutely not.
Is that something you're ever going to forget?
No. It's etched in my memory forever.
Did Susan tell you that although she was anxious about talking to the person, that she had definitely made the decision to go through with it regardless?
Yes.
Do you recall specifically what she said about that?
She said she had to do it. She was very conflicted and very sad and very upset, but she felt like it was the right thing to do.
Did she at any point during this conversation in December, did she mention to you when approximately she expected that she would be talking to this person where she would blow the situation wide open?
In just a few days. It was very imminent.
Do you recall previously stating that she told you that she was going to be talking to somebody in the following January, the next month?
Well, I talked to her just before Christmas, and so that the 1st of January was just a few days.
How did you find out that Susan had been murdered?
I had a classmate call me and tell me. I had a classmate tell me that it had happened.
Do you remember when you found out about it?
I don't remember.
Was it, I want you to assume that she was murdered the night of the 22nd or the morning of the 23rd of December of 2000. If I were to ask you, do you remember, did you find out near in time? Do you even know?
I don't know.
When you found out, what did you think had happened?
I don't know. I conjectured that it might have been because of the manner in which she was killed. I thought, well, maybe it's a mob hit, but I know Susie, and she wouldn't let somebody in easily. It would have been very difficult for her to have opened the door to anyone that she didn't know.
During your conversation with Susie in December, did she express...
Your Honor, 304. Pause the video at 1 hour, 1 minute, and 45 seconds.
All right, thank you. It is time for our mid-afternoon break. Let's come back at 3:20 p.m. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case.